So today we're going to be checking out an interview with the lead writer of Clair Obscur Expedition 33, Jennifer Svedberg-Yen, where she talks about the original incarnation of this game and how it was pretty wild and out there and even featured zombies, which is pretty nuts. She also talks about the shocking finale of Part 1, and also how, when it comes to good versus evil in this game, it's not technically black and white. So if any of that sounds cool to you, feel free to click the like button, and if you're new here and you'd like to stick around, you can subscribe and let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. So just a heads up, this video will contain spoilers for the story of Expedition 33, including the game's ending. So if you haven't finished the game yet, maybe save this video for later and then come back, but don't worry, I will give spoiler warnings in advance so you know when to click away in case you still want to watch. Now, as for the visual aspect of the video, I'll be using combat footage with some of the super bosses and some of the regular story bosses. However, it will be out of context, so there won't be any story spoilers, so to speak, in that footage. So, fun fact before we start, Jennifer Svedberg-Yen has never technically officially published any of her writing before Clair Obscur. She's written some stuff here and there, but it was all just kept to herself. Clair Obscur is the first official piece of writing that she has published, and it's amazing. This is a story that is so deep and layered and thoughtful. And the fact that this is technically, if you want to, put this term out there, a first-time writer, what she's been able to put together is just astonishing. It's incredible. But getting to the interview, this comes to us from the gamer who got to sit down with Jennifer and talk all things Clair Obscur. And the first thing they talk about is actually how this project came to be and how initially it was incredibly different from what we ended up getting. Jennifer goes on to say, this game was very different. The gameplay would have been similar, but the story was completely different. It was set in a steampunk Victorian England with zombies, aliens, and various things. That version of the game they would work on for 6 months until things changed. So Jennifer continues by saying, we spoke to some potential investors who said, you can think bigger. Don't hold yourself back just because you're worried about funding. If you could do what you wanted to do, what would you write? So Guillaume called me and he's just like, all right, reboot. We're starting from scratch. And Expedition 33 was born. Now there is some footage of this earlier incarnation of the game, which I'll try to put in this video. However, if there's any weird copyright issues I run into, you guys will just be seeing basic footage from Expedition 33. But looking at this game, from my understanding, it was titled We Lost. And it is very, very different from what we ended up getting. Although there are some things that we, can see like the inception of that would eventually bleed its way into Clair Obscur, things like character names, Mael, Lune, I believe Verso is also in there, and you can kind of get an idea of what they wanted to do in terms of the gameplay mechanics, the UI, how the characters attacked, but everything was visually very, very different. Again, it had that steampunk kind of vibe, as opposed to what we ended up getting with, I believe it's Belle Epoque style. I'm not French, so I may have butchered that, but I very much love the art style that we got in the official game. But zombies, aliens, that kind of stuff, it kind of felt like maybe they were trying to make something that they thought would appeal to a wider audience instead of going with just what spoke to them. So that conversation with those investors really changed things. And I'm kind of curious to know if maybe one of those groups was the publisher, Kepler Interactive, because we covered an interview from a few weeks ago with one of the heads of Kepler, and just hearing them talk about this game and the development team, they clearly didn't care about money. Their biggest thing was, we just want to support you guys in the vision that you have. What do you really want to truly make? Whatever it is, we got your back. And what's cool is that Kepler, from my understanding, is a publishing studio that has double-digit staff, meaning they have less than 100 people working for them. And you compare that to Sandfall, which also is a small development studio, it kind of seems like a really good fit. And also just, clarification there, when this game initially came out, we were all under the impression that a good chunk of the dev team was from Ubisoft. Turns out it's only 3 members, Guillaume, who is the lead director and CEO of Sandfall, and 2 others. So it's not technically a huge Ubisoft exodus that happened, but 3 of their members did leave to come work on this game at Sandfall. And fun little story here, the game's composer, Lorien Testard, said that the pitch Guillaume gave him was, our game starts and our heroes have just lost. And that was enough for Lorien to be like, you know what, I'm on board. And he would become the game's lead composer, crafting an incredible soundtrack that is most likely going to win Soundtrack of the Year, not just at the Game Awards, but in tons of other award ceremonies. It's a beautifully crafted soundtrack that features orchestral music, rock, choirs, cool bass lines, and accordion. The accordion in this game goes so hard, I love it. Now, when it came to creating what this new version of the game would be, some of it was a combination of a painting that Guillaume had come across that he really liked, as well as a short story that Jennifer was working on, where an artist had the ability to enter a canvas, which, you know, we may talk about later in this video. But oddly enough, one of the core themes of this game's story would actually come from Guillaume's mom. Jennifer would go on to say, around the same time, Guillaume's mom actually helped us. He asked her, what is the worst thing that could happen to you? And she said, to lose you, or to lose any of her children. And so that became our catalyst. Which, again, we will touch on later because that is some heavy spoiler stuff that just speaks to the core of what this game's story is. So, spoiler alert, we now reach the point where we talk about the ending of Act 1 and the death of the character Gustave. And this is a character that they knew from the very beginning would die at some point in the story. So Jennifer goes on to say, in general, with a lot of these plot points, it's about what makes sense in the story and what makes sense in terms of the evolution of the characters. It's about thinking about what will push the characters further along in their emotional journey and what will really make sense within the broader theme of what we're trying to achieve. It's a pet peeve of mine when people write stuff and they don't know where they're going with it, and then they try to figure it out as they go. It's like the TV shows Alias or Lost. I need to have the answers to the questions. And with the death of Gustave, as well as many other things in this game, I can't help but notice parallels to another game that I really love, and that's Final Fantasy VII. So spoiler alert for those who haven't played FF7 or even the 7 Remake trilogy up to Rebirth, but losing Gustave reminded me a lot of losing a character like Aerith. Both of these are characters that you think are going to be main party members. I mean, if you look at the box art for Clair Obscur, Gustave is right there front and center with the other characters about to fight the Paintress, but he never makes it that far. His death ends up becoming the motivation for these characters to continue their expedition and fight even harder. And funny enough, as I was playing through the game, I did a ton of exploration in Act 1 before I even got to the end of it. So I was visiting a lot of high-level areas, fighting a ton of hidden bosses and super bosses, and leveling up like crazy. And I noticed with characters like Lune, Mael, Ciel, they were unlocking new abilities on their skill trees as we were leveling up. With Gustave, that was not happening. I reached a point where I just got to the end of his skill tree and everything else was locked. So I started to wonder to myself, something's gonna happen to Gustave. Either he's gonna die or he's gonna be taken away from us and be brought back, you know, later in the story. And sure enough, he ends up dying. And I have to say, his death scene is so well done. You think of a villain, well, he's not really a villain, so to speak, which we will get into a little bit later, but a character like Renoir, whenever he shows up, it's intimidation station. The first thing you hear is the sound of that cane hitting the ground. And I gotta give major props to the sound design team because whenever that sound plays, it just reverberates throughout the environment as well as my chest. I get really scared and nervous. It's like, oh no, Michael Myers just showed up. Some bad stuff is about to go down. And sure enough, he ends up killing Gustave. And the setup for this is all so well done. Up to that point, Gustave and Mael, who are super, super close, they have these moments together where they'll just be talking and picking up rocks and throwing them as like a celebration of look how much closer we're getting to the Paintress. And as they're about to do that, after they've just had this big achievement, he's taken away from her. So losing him, planning that from the beginning, allowing the characters to eventually grieve, which again we'll touch on a little bit further, it was so well done. And even looking back again, like Gustave's weapons, I don't think any of his weapons have any passive abilities like the other characters do. He's just sword guy that does damage. Maybe he's got some elemental stuff, but that's about it. So they really do kind of leave little hints here and there of like, oh, this character's not gonna, you know, make it very far. Now up next, Jennifer talks about how in this game, there isn't necessarily good versus versus evil, or like clearly good guy versus bad guy. A lot of it is kind of left up to the interpretation of the player. Jennifer goes on to say, one of the philosophies that Guillaume and I both have about storytelling is we don't want the story to be cut and dry in terms of this is right, this is wrong, this is what you should be doing. We raise questions and we want the player to engage with those questions, and we want the player to be part of that decision making. Everything really needs to work with the player's own life experiences and the journey they went through with these characters. In terms of antagonists, that's also something that I think depends on the perspective of the player and how you think about the world and what you value. Another philosophical point that Guillaume and I sort of set early on was that this is not about good versus evil. This is about a world where people genuinely care about each other and conflicts arise because they have different perspectives on what needs to be done. And that right there has so many damn layers to it. Where do we even begin? I'll try not to ramble, but picking up with characters like Gustave, for example. Earlier on in the game, Gustave is ready to call it quits. He sees his expedition wiped out. He feels he's the last one, so why not just end things until Lune comes across and actually pulls him out of that darkness. And as they go further into their adventure, Gustave is having doubts. He's like, if we find Maëlle, we should just turn back. This is going bad. We need to regroup, think this through, maybe just call it quits. And there's a really, really great argument between Gustave and Lune, where Lune repeats the phrase, like their motto of when one falls, we continue. And she says it a few more times, but she really emphasizes the win, meaning we as expeditioners knew what we signed up for. We knew that there was a really good chance we weren't coming back. And the game does an incredible job of selling that point to you with the world building of all of the expeditions that came before you, with all of the journals you can find. And you learn so much about those expeditions in the world itself, how some of them were really, really well prepared. Some made it really, really far and laid the foundation for other expeditions. Something as simple as handholds in a rock face are explained as other expeditions building those into the walls, knowing that other expeditions that come after them can now use them to get further along. You also learn that there were some expeditions that were woefully underprepared and got taken out by something as simple as a poisonous mushroom that they were trying to turn into food. But the point is, they know that signing up for this expedition means that there's a good chance they won't come back. And that's what Lune is really trying to hammer home, that we're doing this for a greater good, even if it means that we're sacrificing ourselves. Now, when it comes to good versus evil, the game really does start off that way. You think human beings, expeditioners, people being gommaged, good guys, paintress, bad guy. But the further you get into the story, you realize, oh no, that's not what this is. It's a story about grief, which, you know, is kind of similar to Final Fantasy VII Remake's trilogy and what they're doing, telling the story of grief and how a character like Cloud is processing it. And there's this really brilliant moment at the end of Act 2 where you beat the Paintress and you think, oh, we did it. We saved people. The gommage will stop. You return back to Lumiere heroes, and then Verso sits down to read the letter. And we as the player learn what Verso has known all along. The Paintress was not technically the villain. The Paintress was not erasing people. It was Renoir. And not even technically the Renoir we battled, the real Renoir. Again, there's layers to the story. But in that moment, that realization hits like a gut punch. And we see this gommage wave heading for Lumiere. And a character like Verso is ready. He closes his eyes and accepts what's to come. Because for him, he's tired. He has led this expedition along saying, yeah, we can defeat the Paintress. But he hasn't told them that by defeating the Paintress, everyone will cease to exist, as well as that world, which is what he's working towards. Because for a character like Verso, who is so layered, he is living in a world where he is immortal and he's constantly witnessing grief and death, and he's tired. So you're hit with that twist of, oh no, we just made a massive mistake and wiped out the wrong person. But then it goes even further and you're hit with a secondary twist of, this world that we're in is technically a world within a canvas that is being painted by Verso's family. And based on like the loose connections I've been able to make is that this canvas was created by Verso when he was a kid and he painted it. Eventually he would grow up and move on to other artistic endeavors, specifically music. And when Verso dies and is taken away from his family, they are hit with extreme grief, specifically his mother. So this canvas is literally the last thing that she has left from her son. And the way she deals with her grief is by being in that world and painting a fake family where Verso exists, Renoir exists, everyone that she has, loved exists. And she is essentially unable to get past that grief, and she's so stuck in that world. So then Renoir, the real Renoir, goes in there and he just wants his wife to accept what happened and move on. So he's trying everything he can to push her out of the canvas and get her to confront that grief and accept it and move on. So he's the one erasing people, and she, as the paintress, was essentially trying to give a warning, like, this is the number on the monolith, this is the people that I can protect before Renoir shows up and wipes out the next group. So when you look at it from that perspective, it really isn't good versus evil, it's grief. It's a game, a story talking about people grieving, how they handle that grief. The mother being unable to accept and confront the grief, so she lives in this fake world with a fake family that she can continue to paint and create, while Renoir, the husband, is trying to pull his wife out of this grief, because this grief, this cycle of grief, is not only affecting their family, but it's now affecting the world within the painting, which might sound confusing, but think of it like the Matrix. You've got the real world, and then you've got the Matrix. That's kind of how I'm seeing Clair Obscur Expedition 33 story in regards to like painting and canvases and all that. But even within that canvas, this world is very much a real, living, breathing world with real people with thoughts and feelings and emotions who also grieve. And we see these characters grieve the loss of Gustave, and they all handle it differently. Maëlle, being the youngest, the teenager, she's confused, she's angry. Why aren't the people around me taking a moment to stop and be upset like I am? A character like Lune, when they lose Gustave, she very much falls back on the thing that she knows best, and that is order. She literally goes through an order of operations after losing Gustave of, okay, there's a good chance we might not survive this, so I have to create a journal and fill it with information that the next expedition can then use moving forward. And that's who Lune is as a character. She's very straightforward, very analytical, almost dry at times. And she falls back to just the one thing she knows, which is order. Ciel is kind of like the glue of the family. She is relatively well adjusted considering the world she's grown up in and the things that she's been through, but she is there to try and pull people back from the edge of that grief and try to get them to continue moving on. And then you've got Verso, who might legitimately be my favorite character in the game, because Verso is such a complex, mysterious character that even after you learn more about him, there are still so many more layers that you just can't even conceive of. And I have to shout out, I don't know the name of the actor, but whoever does the mocap action for Verso, whoever does the face tech for Verso, the writing, as well as the performance of Ben Starr, all come together to create this incredible character who really says so much without saying a damn thing. And as you reach that part in the game where those twists happen, you start to look back on previous things that Verso has said, the way he's acted, and you really start to piece together, oh, this is what's actually happening. This Verso is not technically the real Verso. He's a copy created by the paintress that has all of the memories and experiences that the real Verso had. So he knows his own existence is technically a lie, which is why he wants everything to be gommage, which is why he wants to just end it all. And again, I go back to the parallels of FF7 and the way that story is structured out, with Lumiere very much being like your starting ground, the most realistic grounded area probably in the game, like the beginning of FF7, like Midgar is, and then you venture out into the world and you come across all of this crazier stuff, and you're chasing this man with white hair who you view as the antagonist from the get-go. A character like Verso, who, kind of like Cloud, is, spoiler alert, a puppet who comes to realize they aren't who they thought they were. It's just, there's so much going on. This game is literally, and I'm not trying to be cute here when I say this game's story is literally like a painting. There are so many different layers to this story, to the characters. Even like the theme of painting is in the gameplay mechanics. Pictos, chroma, gradient attacks, the recoat ability, even the names of skills, like these are all art terms, which they lay everything you need to know right out in front of you, but they don't hold your hand to try and explain it. We all have that point, I think, when we play this game at the end of Act 2, going into Act 3, where that light bulb goes off and we understand what is going on and we're able to piece 2 and 2 together and be like, holy crap. This is like meta commentary. And then it goes even further when you look at a team like Sandfall, which again is a small development team that left their bigger jobs, specifically Guillaume working at Ubisoft, and came together to just create a passion project that is so creative from the ground up. Even Guillaume's mom had a hand in crafting this story. It's insane. It's so beautiful. It's so well put together. And then there's even more stuff with Verso about how he may have potentially made this painting as a kid, but then you start to connect things like the name of his dog, which is Monoko. And then you look at the Monoko in the game and it's like, oh yeah, Verso and Monoko, that relationship is very much a boy and his dog. They crack jokes, they fight with each other. Verso dangles fighting in front of Monoko like it's some sort of chew toy. The way Monoko acts, he's like the furry companion of the group. It's just so well done. It's so well done. I need to shut up before I go on an even bigger tangent. But I say all of that to say that this, again, there's not clearly a bad guy or a good guy in this situation because you understand where everyone is coming from. Everyone is dealing with this grief in this game and everyone handles it differently. And I think that's just so beautiful because we all relate to that. All of us have experienced grief and we will continue to experience grief. As awful as it is, it's a part of life. Now, we'll end this by saying, what could the future hold for Clair Obscur? Will there be DLC? What are Sandfall focused on next? Jennifer goes on to say, we're actually really focused on bug smashing. We were not expecting such a strong reception, and we want to keep the momentum going, so we're focused on user experience right now. But that doesn't mean content won't be coming in the future. With the narrative lead teasing, when the dust settles, we will start thinking about DLC, but it's probably not going to be for a while. And there's really a lot of different directions they can go with the DLC, exploring more about like the writers, the painters, other canvases that may exist. She would go on to say that in terms of creating their characters, they create entire lore Bibles for these characters. So there's a family history for someone like Gustav that dates back centuries. They put so much work into creating these characters and their backstories and making sure that they have a lot to pull from. But for me, the DLC I want to see, I want a sim building DLC in the vein of The Sims, focused around my favorite odd couple, Esquier and Francois. I love those two characters. I love their interactions. I love how Francois is such a grumpy rock turtle. He's constantly messing with Esquier, who is like this pure, innocent soul. And the thing I love about Esquier, he's technically the most powerful being in that world, but so lazy. And there's something so endearing about that. And he's just got this wholesomeness to him, which again plays into the fact that he was, painted by Verso. But who knows what the future will hold in regards to DLC. But I think focusing on the main game, trying to squash any bugs that might be there, fix performance issues, I think is the right thing to do. For me personally, as I was going through the monolith, I couldn't help but notice that for whatever reason, when I got into combat, I had massive performance issues. The frame rate just dipped and I could feel it navigating the menus, doing the QTEs. There was like a heavy delay and it was only in that specific area. So maybe that's something they can iron out in the future as well. So heads up, we are about to discuss the game's ending, so if you haven't finished it yet, you've been warned. But the whole idea of can you break through that cycle of grief and move on, or do you let it swallow you whole and blind you, 100% play into the game's endings. And yes, you heard me right, I said endings. There are two endings to this game, the Mael ending and the Verso ending. And funny enough, I feel like these endings really embody and reflect the title that is Clair Obscur, which from my understanding is French for light dark, because both of these endings have light and darkness to them. But that's just kind of how I view it. Now again, people will view these endings differently based on perspective, how you feel about the characters. But for me, the Mael ending left me feeling really uncomfortable. And both endings, trust me, have uncomfortable things about them. Now with her ending, she essentially eventually chooses to not listen to Renoir or Verso, and she continues to live on within the canvas in that painted world that she's come to love so much. And she does bring everyone who was gommaged back, including our boy Gustave. So it's like, oh, this is cool. But as I'm watching this ending, I couldn't shake the feeling that something felt off. Something just didn't feel right about this ending as I was watching it. I was starting to feel honestly really uncomfortable. And then Verso shows up, and he steps out on stage, and he's about to perform in this concert hall for people, which I believe he and Maëlle actually talked about earlier in the game, about how one day maybe he would put on a show for her. I can't remember if it was Maëlle or if it was someone else in the party, but I think it was those two. And he steps out, and he's older, he's grayed, he's clearly worn down, and he sits down, and he can't bring himself to play the piano. He's reluctant. And again, I gotta give massive credit to the face tech and the animation team in the eyes. Whoever was in charge of the eyes, my dude, he looks so defeated and reluctant, and he's looking out in the crowd, and he sees everyone, and the shots of the other characters, again, is very unsettling. It's super creepy to me, which other people might not get that vibe, but that's what I got. And then he looks at Maëlle, and he sees Maëlle as he saw his dying sick mother, the woman who couldn't pull herself out of the canvas, and because of that, it was killing her. He now sees that same thing happening to his sister, and he realizes in that moment, she's gone. He can't reach her anymore. There's no pulling her out of this canvas and getting her healthy. She's now here, living a lie. And look, I get it. Maëlle's life outside of the canvas sucks, my dude. It is bad. There's no quality of life for her there. So I get it why she would want to live in the canvas in this world where she has a family, she has her brother, she has quality of life, but it's not technically real. And it's also not healthy for her to be in that canvas for as long as she's going to be. She's not going to be able to get herself out. And she is essentially becoming a new paintress. And I guess the best way to put it is the store isn't closed, but it is under new management. Is kind of how I viewed that ending. So while there is lightness there of bringing everyone back who got gommaged, this world continues on. Gustave is back. It's also dark because Maëlle is going to lose herself. That's at least how I interpreted that ending. It's really a bummer. It left me feeling uncomfortable. I was so creeped out. And I gotta say, the shot of Maëlle in particular with all of that like chroma and the ink from the canvas on her face was super unsettling. It stuck with me for a very long time. Now, the other ending, which is Verso's ending, again, has light and dark, but I feel like there's more light to his ending than there is darkness. And essentially, Verso chooses to finally tell his younger self, it's okay to stop painting, we can rest now, which obviously Maëlle's not happy about because that means that canvas, that one link that she has left of her brother, that her family has, is going to be gone. And they won't be able to revisit it or have anything left of her brother Verso. But he's tired, man. And I get it. He is essentially living this tormented life of grief and sadness over and over and over again, and he can't take it anymore. So he finally is able to rest. Now comes the dark part where we now lose this world, this canvas, this world that we spent so much time in with all of these wonderful characters. They are now gone. Like, it sucks. It's painful. I'm losing personally. I am losing Lune, my second waifu. I fell in love with this woman and now she's just being gommaged away. We see Monoko, Eskie, Maëlle, Ciel, and Lune all gommaging. Ciel seems okay with it. She's, again, very well adjusted considering the circumstances, but Lune is pissed. She sits down in defiance and stares at Verso like, how could you do this to us? And look, it is sad. Like, that world is so cool and I love those characters, but I also think about how it's so unhealthy for Maëlle to be in there and how, her and Verso, their father Renoir, one of the reasons why he wanted to pull his wife out of the canvas and destroy it was so that way he could get his wife back and healthy, but also so he could save his daughter Maëlle. Or Alicia is what she went by. She now adopts the name Maëlle. He knows if Maëlle goes into this canvas, she's going to end up just like her mom, and he does not want that. Which, if you look at the Maëlle ending, is what happens. She ends up like her mom. So as Verso gommages and is laid to rest, we cut to the real world. We see Maëlle, we see Renoir, we see Alina, I believe is the wife's name. We also see the other daughter, Clea, and they're all around Verso's tombstone, and they're just saying their final goodbyes to him. And the entire family in this scene, the way it's shot, they're bathed in light. And again, it's sad because we've lost that painted world. We've lost those characters. But now this family is out in the real world, and they now have a chance to finally actually grieve and put Verso to rest and move forward. So there's still some hope there when it comes to that ending. And Maëlle does get one final goodbye. She sees like these ghost images of Expedition 33 pop up, and she gets to wave them off as they disappear. But either way, this game fucked me up. And any way you slice it, you're not really gonna get a happy ending out of this game, which I think might be kind of the point. Like, this is an incredibly artistic endeavor of a game. There's no corporate oversight. So these devs could just kind of be like, this is what we wanted to do. It's not gonna be like your cookie cutter happy ending, but you know, that's how life goes sometimes. And personally, I'm not usually a big fan of games having multiple endings. I kind of prefer when writers be like, this is our ending, we're committing to it. You either like it or you don't. But in this case for me, Verso is the ending that I personally go with. That's the one I subscribe to. But with that being said, that is the video. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below of the story of Clair Obscur Expedition 33, as well as Jennifer's writing. And if they were to do DLC for this game, what would you guys personally want to see? With that being said, that's the video. I am Curious Corduroy. I will see you guys in the next one. Please remember to always be excellent to one another.